An alien wolf warns a human. We're about to have puppies. What it means is terrifying. Jason had always been a solitary figure on the colony. A former soldier-turned-tracker, he was known for his ability to survive in the harsh, alien wilderness that surrounded their small settlement on the planet of Ferox. The planet was far from Earth, its sky a pale violet, and its forests thick with strange creatures. Few of the settlers ventured into the wilds for long, but Jason was different. He had seen war and he had seen death. This planet with its unfamiliar dangers didn't scare him. It was early morning when Jason set out for his usual patrol. The colony was nestled at the edge of a vast forest, where towering trees stretched up like ancient guardians. The air was thick with the smell of damp moss, and the sound of distant, unfamiliar animals echoed through the mist. Jason moved silently through the underbrush, his footsteps barely leaving a trace on the soft ground. He had a sixth sense when it came to predators, an instinct honed from years of service, and something didn't feel right today. He paused, scanning the trees, his eyes narrowing as he noticed a flicker of movement. A large, shadowy form limped through the dense foliage, and Jason's instincts kicked in. It was an alien wolf, a Gorothea, the species known to be both incredibly dangerous and fiercely intelligent. Most settlers were afraid of the Gorothea, believing them to be mindless beasts, but Jason knew better. They were smarter than they appeared, their primal nature masked by their calculated hunting strategies. The creature was struggling, dragging its left leg. Jason had seen many wounded animals in his time on the planet, but this one was different. There was something almost deliberate in the way it moved, as if it was seeking him out. Slowly he crouched, trying to stay out of sight as he observed. The wolf stopped a few meters from him, its amber eyes scanning the surrounding area. The forest was quiet now, every living thing seemingly aware of the predator's presence. Jason waited, not daring to make a sound until the wolf's gaze shifted toward him. For a brief moment they locked eyes. Then something unexpected happened. A voice, soft but clear, entered Jason's mind. "We're about to have puppies," the voice said. It wasn't spoken aloud. It was inside his head, as though the creature was using telepathy to communicate. Jason's heart skipped a beat. The Gorothea were not known for telepathic communication with humans, let alone any language beyond their growls and howls. His hand instinctively moved toward the weapon at his side, a plasma rifle, but he didn't raise it. Something about the wolf's gaze held him in place. It wasn't aggression he felt from it, but urgency, a desperation. The wolf staggered, and Jason finally took a step forward. The creature's body was covered in thick fur, but beneath it, Jason could see the faint outline of deep, vicious wounds. It had been attacked by something or someone. As he approached, the wolf's posture shifted, its head dipping low, a silent plea in its eyes. The voice in his head came again, this time more strained. "The pack will come, you must stop them." Jason hesitated. Stop them. What did that even mean? Was this creature warning him about its pack, or was it something far worse? Before he could respond, the wolf collapsed, its body crumpling to the ground in front of him. Jason rushed to its side, his heart racing as he knelt beside it. The creature's breathing was shallow, its once powerful frame now weak and vulnerable. There was no time to waste. He needed to get it back to the colony's medical facility, but first he had to understand what had happened. He reached out, gently placing a hand on the wolf's head. The creature's eyes fluttered open one last time, locking onto his. "The puppies, they aren't what you think," it whispered in his mind, its voice barely audible. Then with a final, labored exhale, the wolf went limp in his arms. Jason stood up slowly, cradling the creature's body. There was too much to process. Puppies? What was it talking about? And why had it reached out to him of all people? There had to be more to this. The colonists had only encountered Gorothea in the wild. They hadn't studied them in depth. No one had any real understanding of their biology or behavior, but Jason had seen enough in his years to know that this wasn't just a regular attack. He couldn't stay here. The colony needed to know about this, and the wolf's message, whatever it meant, needed to be communicated. Jason wasn't sure what he was walking into, but one thing was clear: this was no ordinary encounter. The stakes had just gotten a lot higher. He carefully lifted the injured creature, cradling it in his arms, and began the trek back toward the colony. As he walked, the feeling of unease only grew stronger. The forest around him felt alive in a way it hadn't before. The wind seemed to carry strange whispers, and the once familiar sounds of distant wildlife now seemed to be closing in. Jason had spent countless hours in this forest, but today it felt different, more dangerous, like something was waiting. The journey back felt longer than usual, every step filled with a growing sense of dread. He couldn't shake the wolf's words from his mind. The puppies aren't what you think. What did that mean? What was about to happen? By the time Jason reached the outskirts of the colony, the sun had dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the settlement. He made his way toward the medical building, where the colony's doctor, Dr. Rhea, was likely still working late. She was one of the few people who had some experience with alien biology, though even she would find this situation unprecedented. He burst through the doors of the medical facility, breathless and frantic. "Doctor." Rhea looked up in surprise, her expression quickly turning to concern as she saw the wolf in Jason's arms. "What happened?" she asked, rushing to his side. "What is that?" "Agorithea," Jason said, his voice grim. "It was injured and it spoke to me." "Doctor." Rhea blinked, clearly not believing him at first. "Spoke, you mean telepathically?" "Yes," Jason replied, his tone firm. "It said something about puppies. It's important. We need to examine it quickly." Dr. Rhea frowned but didn't hesitate. She guided Jason to one of the examination tables, and they carefully placed the creature on it. The wolf's body was cold now, but its pulse was still faint, though it was clear that time was running out. Jason stepped back, his mind racing. The wolf had died in his arms, but its warning stayed with him. The colony had no idea what they were dealing with. Whatever this puppy business was, it was more than just a warning. It was a threat. As doctor. Rhea began her examination. Jason couldn't shake the feeling that the real danger was only just beginning. Jason stood at the doorway, watching Dr. Rhea work on the Agorithea wolf. The room was dim, lit only by the soft glow of diagnostic monitors. His thoughts were racing, replaying the moments from the forest when the wolf had spoken to him. "We're about to have puppies." What did that mean? He had never encountered anything like this before. Dr. Rhea moved with steady hands, examining the wolf's wounds. She had a practiced, professional air, but Jason could see the concern in her eyes. The creature was unlike any animal they'd encountered on Ferox. The Agorithea were known for their size and strength, but this one, despite its injuries, had an intelligence in its eyes. Something far beyond a simple predator. She looked up from her examination and met Jason's gaze. "This wolf is different, Jason. The wounds are unusual. It doesn't look like it was attacked by another animal. The injuries seem almost deliberate." Jason frowned, walking closer. "Deliberate? What do you mean?" Dr. Rhea hesitated, her fingers gently probing the creature's side. "The marks are too precise. It's almost as if something or someone has been using advanced weapons. This isn't just a fight between predators. These wounds, they're unnatural." Jason's stomach tightened. He had been thinking the same thing. The way the wolf had limped into the clearing, its eyes locking with his, it hadn't been seeking help from just anyone. It had been searching for him, as though it knew something was coming and needed to warn him. He ran a hand through his short-cropped hair, trying to focus. "So, you think someone's been hunting these creatures?" Dr. Rhea's eyes narrowed as she looked at the wolf again, her brow furrowing. "It's possible, but there's something else, Jason." "The telepathic communication. The wolf was trying to tell you something important." Jason felt a chill crawl up his spine. The more he thought about the wolf's words, the more they seemed like a warning. But a warning about what? And why him? He crossed his arms, frustration building. What's the connection between this wolf and its pack? What do the puppies mean? Dr. Rhea glanced at the diagnostic readout on the monitor, her lips tight with worry. "I'm not sure. But based on what I know of their species, Agorithea wolves don't speak like this unless it's something crucial. They're highly territorial, but they don't often communicate with humans, at least not this directly." Jason took a deep breath. "So you think we're dealing with something much bigger than a simple animal attack?" "Yes," Dr. Rhea said, standing up and turning to face him. "Whatever it is, it's not just about this wolf, it's about its pack. And from the looks of it, we might be facing something far more dangerous than we can handle." Jason felt the weight of her words settle over him. The colony wasn't prepared for something like this. The settlers had only recently begun to establish a foothold on Ferox. There were only a few hundred of them, and while they were well equipped for basic survival, they hadn't anticipated facing creatures with advanced, possibly alien intelligence. Jason had been stationed here for almost a year, and in that time he'd encountered hostile wildlife, but none like this. Agorithea wolves were a known threat, but this felt different, darker, more calculated. A sudden beeping from the monitor broke his train of thought. Doctor. Ria's expression shifted to one of alarm. She quickly moved back to the table and checked the readouts. "This can't be right," she muttered, more to herself than to Jason. "What is it?" Jason asked, stepping closer. "The wolf's vitals, they're stabilizing." "That's not possible." Dr. Ria's voice trembled slightly, a hint of disbelief in her tone. "Its heart rate is slowing down, almost as if it's regenerating. This is abnormal. I've never seen anything like it." Jason's heart skipped a beat. He had been expecting the worst, but regeneration. The idea that this wolf could heal itself, that it might not be as weak as it appeared, sent a surge of unease through him. "Are you saying the wolf's coming back?" Jason asked, his voice low. "I don't know, Doctor," Ria said, shaking her head. "But this changes everything. If it's regenerating at this rate, it might not stay docile for long. We need to be careful." Jason glanced at the creature's still form. It looked so peaceful now, almost serene, but he knew that could change in an instant. The Gorathea were dangerous when provoked, and now, with whatever was happening to this wolf, it could become something far worse. "We need to find out what the puppies are," Jason said, his mind racing. "Before it's too late." Dr. Ria nodded. "Agreed. I'll gather more data, see if I can find any historical references. Maybe there's something in the old records about these creatures, something we've missed." Jason turned to leave, but paused at the door. "Dr. Ria?" "Yes," she said, looking up from the diagnostic screen. "Be careful," Jason said, his voice serious. "Something doesn't feel right about this. If that wolf was trying to warn me, it's because we're facing a threat that's bigger than any of us realize." Dr. Ria gave him a nod, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. "I'll keep that in mind." Jason stepped out of the medical facility and into the cold night air. The colony, usually quiet this time of evening, felt unnervingly still. The distant hum of generators and the occasional sound of the wind rustling through the trees were the only noises. He scanned the sky above, watching the stars twinkle like distant, indifferent sentinels. His mind was far from the beauty of the night, focused instead on the words of the dying wolf. "We're about to have puppies." What did it mean, and why had the creature chosen him to warn? He had no answers, but he felt the weight of something terrible on the horizon. The colony wasn't prepared for what was coming. None of them were. Jason's thoughts drifted back to the pack of Gorathea wolves, who might have already sensed the wounded one's condition. They were intelligent, capable of hunting in ways no human or other species could predict. And if they were planning something, Jason knew they wouldn't wait long to act. He had to act quickly. He couldn't let fear take over. The future of the colony depended on it. Jason made his way toward the command center, where the colony's leaders gathered. He needed to inform them about what had happened, about the possible threat to their safety. The settlers had no idea what was lurking in the wilderness, and Jason wasn't about to let them walk into the unknown unprepared. When he arrived at the center, he found Commander Phillips and Lieutenant Avery discussing the usual matters of security and supply. They looked up as he entered, their expressions shifting to concern. "What's the situation?" Commander Phillips asked, his tone all business. "It's worse than we thought," Jason said, his voice steady but urgent. "We've got to prepare for a potential attack from the Gorathea pack. There's something different about them, something we don't fully understand yet. But I need your help to find out more before it's too late." Commander Phillips looked grim, but he nodded. "We'll get a team together. You'll have what you need." Jason's gut twisted with unease. Time was running out, and the wolves, whatever their true nature, were closing in. The puppies weren't just offspring. They were something far more dangerous, something the colony might not survive if they didn't act fast. He had to figure out what was coming and how to stop it before it was too late. The next few hours passed in a blur of preparations. Jason was no longer sure whether he was helping to prepare for a potential attack or just trying to keep himself busy to fight off the growing dread gnawing at him. After briefing Commander Phillips and Lieutenant Avery, the news spread quickly throughout the colony. A small team of specialists had already been assembled, and they were making their way to the medical facility to assist Dr. Ria with the Gorathea wolf. Jason stood outside the command center, looking out at the horizon, trying to push the unsettling feeling from his chest. The air was still and cold, and the distant forests that once seemed so majestic now appeared menacing, as though watching, waiting. His mind kept returning to the wolf's final words, "The puppies aren't what you think." What did that mean? The Gorothea were known predators, but Jason was beginning to suspect that they weren't simply beasts. There was something darker at play here, something hidden beneath the surface of their culture. The idea that these so-called puppies could be far more than just offspring made Jason feel like he was standing at the edge of a precipice, with no idea how deep the fall would be if he jumped. He glanced up at the sky again. The pale violet of the sky seemed to hang lower than usual, the stars obscured by thin clouds. It was as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Jason turned and headed back into the command center. He needed answers. He needed to understand what they were dealing with. He couldn't just sit back and wait for something to happen. He had to be proactive. Inside, the command center was buzzing with activity. The officers were working efficiently, coordinating the defense plans, while the scientists were still analyzing the information from the medical facility. Commander Phillips looked up as Jason entered, a grim expression on his face. "Everything okay?" the commander asked, noticing Jason's tense posture. "Not really," Jason replied. "I don't think we understand the full scope of what we're dealing with here. The wolf wasn't just trying to warn us about an attack. Whatever's coming, it's bigger than just a predator." Avery, standing next to Phillips, frowned. "What are you getting at?" Jason paused, glancing around the room to make sure no one else was listening. "We need to find out what the puppies really are. I think they might be something more than the offspring of these creatures." Phillips and Avery exchanged a look, and then Phillips nodded. "We're already working on it, Doctor. Rhea is trying to dig into the old records to see if there's anything about the Gorothea that could explain this." "I think we need to move faster," Jason said. "The wolf I found, it's regenerating, and that's not normal. Whatever happens next, it's not going to be just about a few animals attacking us. These wolves are part of something much larger." The commander's face grew even more serious. "What do you suggest?" Jason took a deep breath. "We need to send a team out into the wilderness, find the pack's breeding ground, and stop whatever's happening before it escalates. We can't let these puppies be born if they're capable of what I think they are." There was a long silence as Phillips and Avery considered the suggestion. Finally, the commander spoke. "All right, we'll get the best team together, but we need to be prepared for anything. This could be more dangerous than we realize." Jason nodded, his mind already running through the logistics of the mission. He didn't have much time. If what he feared was true, the colony could be in serious danger. And if the Gorothea wolves were truly capable of something beyond their natural instincts, they could be facing an existential threat that they weren't ready for. Before he could continue, the doors to the command center opened, and Dr. Rhea entered, her face pale with exhaustion. She had been working non-stop since Jason had left her in the medical facility, and now she looked more drained than ever. But there was something else in her eyes, something urgent. "We've found something," she said, her voice tight with anxiety. Jason stepped forward. "What did you find?" "I went through every record we have on the Gorothea species, but there wasn't much," she explained. "They've been studied before, but not thoroughly. Most of the information we have is based on observations, not biological research. However, I found a reference to something in the oldest records. It's an ancient text, a warning from the first settlers on Ferox." Jason felt his stomach tighten. "What does it say, Doctor?" Rhea took a breath and began to read from a small data pad. "The Gorothea wolves, unlike other species, were once part of a much larger ecosystem, one created by an ancient, now extinct race. These wolves were not just predators. They were engineered to be guardians of the planet, protectors of something far more powerful. Their role was to safeguard what was buried beneath the surface, something that could alter the entire ecosystem. And when the puppies were born, they were to be the next generation of these guardians, able to control not just the creatures of the planet, but the very elements themselves." Jason's heart raced as the full implication of the words sank in. "You're saying these wolves weren't just created to hunt, they were created to control everything on this planet?" Dr. Rhea nodded grimly. "That's exactly what this text is saying, and it gets worse. The text also mentions a great awakening, a time when the wolves would no longer just be guardians but rulers of the planet. And the birth of the puppies, it's the beginning of that transformation." Jason's mind was reeling. This wasn't just about a pack of dangerous wolves. This was about an ancient race's plan to reshape the world, and the Gorothea wolves were the key. The puppies weren't simply offspring. They were the next step in an evolution that could bring the planet to its knees. "We have to stop them," Jason said, his voice low and determined. "Whatever is about to happen, we can't let it unfold. We need to find the breeding ground, and we need to stop it before these puppies are born." Dr. Rhea gave a short nod. "I agree. But we don't know what we're up against. If these wolves have been engineered with abilities beyond what we understand, we might be facing something that even our weapons can't stop." Jason felt a wave of frustration wash over him. They had no choice but to move forward. The stakes were too high. "We don't have time to waste," he said, turning to Commander Phillips. "I'll lead the team. I'll go out there and find it." Phillips looked at him, his expression hardening. "I'm not letting you go out there alone, Jason. This is too dangerous." "I'll take a team, but I need to move fast," Jason insisted. "If we wait too long, it could be too late." The commander hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "All right, we'll get a team ready. You leave first thing in the morning." Jason's mind was already focused on the mission ahead. He knew this would be dangerous, but it was the only choice. The colony depended on him to find the breeding grounds and stop whatever was about to happen. He couldn't let fear take over, not now. Not when the survival of everyone was at stake. The next day, as the sun rose over the colony, Jason stood at the edge of the wilderness, ready to embark on a journey that would determine the fate of everyone he cared about. He had no idea what was waiting for him out there, but one thing was certain. He wasn't going to let whatever came next destroy everything they had worked for. The next morning came with a thick fog that rolled over the forest floor like a living thing, swallowing the distant trees, and casting an eerie silence over the colony. Jason stood at the edge of the settlement, staring into the thick mist that hung between the towering trees. His breath hung in the cold air, and despite the early hour, his mind was already sharp and focused on the task ahead. Today would be the most important day of his life. He could feel it in his bones. He had gathered a team of 3 skilled settlers: Lieutenant Avery, a former Marine who had the discipline and the tactical know-how; Dr. Rhea, who had insisted on coming along to continue her research; and an experienced scout, Myra, who had lived on Ferox longer than most. Myra was quiet, but her sharp eyes missed nothing. She was the one who would keep them alive if anything went wrong. They were ready. But Jason knew that readiness meant nothing in the wilds of Ferox. Nothing was ever as simple as it seemed. The planet had its own rules, and it had never been kind to humans. "Everything's packed," Avery said, walking up beside Jason. "The gear's good to go. But I don't like the looks of this fog. Makes everything feel wrong." Jason nodded, his eyes scanning the trees as the mist thickened. "The fog's probably not a good sign, but we can't waste time. Let's move out." The team set off into the wilderness, moving quickly but carefully. Jason led the way, his senses heightened as they entered the dense forest. The trees, which had once seemed so majestic, now loomed like silent sentinels, their twisted branches forming an unnatural canopy above. Every sound, every movement, felt magnified, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. As they trekked deeper into the wilderness, Jason couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them. The wildlife was eerily silent, and every now and then Jason caught a glimpse of glowing eyes in the shadows, eyes that seemed to follow their every move. It wasn't just the usual creatures of Ferox. This was something else, something darker. And the fog only seemed to make it worse. After several hours, they arrived at the edge of a clearing. The fog thinned slightly, and the air felt charged, like a storm was building on the horizon. In the center of the clearing, Jason could see what appeared to be a cave, half hidden behind a curtain of thick vines. The entrance was dark, and an unsettling stillness hung over it, as if whatever was inside had been waiting for them. "We're here," Jason said quietly. He turned to his team. "Stay sharp." They moved forward slowly, weapons at the ready. Jason's hand tightened around his rifle, the weight of the gun familiar but somehow more burdensome now. He knew they weren't just about to face a pack of wolves. They were about to confront something far more dangerous. If the ancient texts were correct, this was where the Gorath's future was to be decided, and if they didn't stop it, the colony would have no future at all. The entrance to the cave was narrow, and Jason motioned for the team to follow him inside. As they stepped through the opening, the air became thick with a musty scent, the kind of smell you'd expect from something long forgotten. The walls of the cave were lined with strange, alien symbols, glowing faintly in the dim light. Jason had seen some of these symbols before, in the records Dr. Rhea had discovered, but now they were all too real. The markings seemed to pulse with a quiet energy, as though the cave itself was alive. "Keep your distance from the walls," Jason whispered. "We don't know if these symbols are part of some kind of trap." The team nodded, staying close but careful. As they moved deeper into the cave, the temperature dropped sharply. It felt like they were walking into the heart of something ancient and forgotten, something that had been waiting for the right moment to awaken. The further they went, the more Jason felt like they were being drawn into a story that had already been written, and they were simply playing their part. After what felt like an eternity, they reached a large chamber at the heart of the cave. The walls were lined with strange, glowing crystals, their light casting an eerie glow across the room. At the center of the chamber, on a raised platform, lay a large, circular nest made of strange, organic materials. Jason's heart sank as he saw the shape of it. The nest looked too much like the description of the Gorothea's breeding grounds in the ancient texts. This was where the puppies would be born, and from what he could tell, the time was fast approaching. He motioned for the team to spread out, scanning the area for any signs of danger. The chamber was silent except for the faint hum of the crystals, but Jason could feel the tension building. This wasn't just a nest. It was a breeding ground for something far more dangerous than he had anticipated. "This is it," Dr. Rhea whispered, her voice barely audible in the cavernous space. "This is where the transformation will happen. The puppies, they're not just offspring. They're the next stage in the Gorothea's evolution." Jason nodded grimly. "We need to stop it. We can't let whatever is going to happen happen." But as he spoke, a low growl echoed through the chamber, reverberating off the stone walls. Jason's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't just one growl. It was the sound of many coming from every corner of the room. He turned sharply, his rifle ready, and his team followed suit, weapons raised. From the shadows, they emerged dozens of Gorothea wolves, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. But these wolves were different. Their bodies were larger, more muscular, and their fur shimmered with a strange, almost metallic sheen. It was clear that these were the alpha wolves, the ones that had been protecting the breeding grounds. And now they were here to protect it from the intruders. Jason's heart raced as he took in the sight. These weren't the wolves he had encountered before. These were something more, something far more dangerous. The leader of the pack, a massive Gorothea with dark, rippling fur, stepped forward, its glowing eyes locked onto Jason's. Jason could feel the weight of its gaze, as if the creature could see straight into his soul. It let out a guttural growl, a sound that sent chills down his spine. Then the wolf spoke, not telepathically, but aloud. Its voice was low and rumbling, as if it had been waiting for this moment for a long time. "You have come too late, human," the wolf said, its voice reverberating through the chamber. "The puppies are already here, and they are beyond your understanding." Jason's stomach tightened. "What do you mean, beyond our understanding?" he demanded, his voice steady despite the fear that was beginning to rise within him. The Gorothea wolf smiled, its teeth gleaming. "The puppies are not just offspring. They are the beginning of a new era, an era where the Gorothea will rise and reclaim what was lost. You cannot stop it. The awakening has already begun." Jason's blood ran cold. The wolf was right. They were too late. Whatever was about to happen was already set in motion. Before he could react, the wolf lunged, its massive form moving with terrifying speed. Jason fired, but the shot went wide. The creature's strength was unlike anything he had ever seen. The air in the chamber crackled with energy as the pack advanced, their glowing eyes fixed on the humans in the center of the room. The battle was about to begin, and Jason realized with a growing sense of dread that the fate of the colony, and perhaps even the entire planet, was now in their hands. The massive Gorothea wolf lunged at Jason with terrifying speed. Its jaws snapped just inches from his face, the air thick with the stench of wet fur and blood. Jason barely had time to react. He dove to the side, rolling across the rocky ground as the creature's powerful limbs crashed down where he had just been standing. The ground shook with the impact, sending tremors through the cave floor. His heart pounded in his chest, but he didn't have time to waste. He had to think fast. "Get back!" Jason shouted, barely managing to scramble to his feet. The rest of the team had already taken defensive positions, weapons raised, but the sheer size and ferocity of the Gorothea wolves made them hesitate. They were outnumbered, and the pack was closing in fast. Lieutenant Avery fired first, his rifle barking loudly in the enclosed space. The blast hit one of the wolves in the side, but the creature didn't flinch. Instead, it charged, its body moving like a blur of fur and muscle. Avery barely had time to aim again before the wolf slammed into him, knocking him backward and sending his weapon skidding across the ground. "Keep firing!" Jason shouted, his voice harsh with urgency. But the pack was too fast, too strong. For every shot they fired, another wolf closed in, leaping from the shadows with an almost supernatural agility. The glowing eyes of the Gorothea wolves seemed to pierce through the dim light, their movements fluid and precise. Dr. Ria's voice broke through the chaos. "Jason, we can't keep fighting them like this. We need to stop the breeding process, the puppies, before it's too late." Jason nodded grimly. He had heard the wolf's warning. The puppies were not just offspring, they were something more. He wasn't sure what exactly that meant, but he knew they couldn't allow whatever was happening to continue. If the Gorothea wolves were planning an awakening, it would be disastrous for the colony, and perhaps the entire planet. His eyes darted around the chamber, searching for anything that could give them an advantage. The large nest in the center of the room was still there, surrounded by glowing crystals. The air in the cave felt charged, and Jason's instincts told him that whatever was happening, the source of it lay in that nest. It was the heart of the Gorothea's transformation, and they had to destroy it. "Doctor!" "Ria Mara with me?" Jason shouted, making his way toward the platform in the center of the room. "Avery, cover us!" Avery, still struggling to get back on his feet, managed to fire off another round, hitting one of the wolves in the flank. It didn't seem to stop it, but it slowed it down just enough for Avery to get some distance. He stumbled toward a nearby wall, backing away from the advancing pack. Jason, Dr. Ria, and Mara dashed toward the nest, dodging and weaving between the charging wolves. The air was thick with the smell of the creatures, and the noise was deafening, the growls, the snarls, the sounds of their claws scraping across the stone floor. Jason's heart raced, but he didn't slow down. He couldn't afford to. Every second mattered. When they reached the nest, Jason stopped short. There was a low hum coming from it, a strange energy that seemed to pulse through the air. The crystals around the platform flickered in rhythm with the sound, their glow growing brighter the closer they got. Jason's hand reached out instinctively, but Dr. Ria grabbed his arm. "Don't touch it," she warned, her voice sharp. "Whatever is happening here, it's tied to this energy. If we interfere, we might make things worse." Jason nodded, his mind working furiously. If touching it was out of the question, they needed to find another way. He glanced around the chamber, his eyes narrowing as he spotted something on the far side of the platform, an alien control panel, half buried in the debris. It was ancient, covered in dust and vines, but there was a faint glow emanating from the cracks. This was it, the key to stopping whatever was happening. "We need to get to that control panel," Jason shouted. "Cover me, Mara and Doctor." Ria immediately took defensive positions, weapons aimed at the approaching wolves. Jason sprinted toward the panel, diving behind a rock formation to avoid a charging wolf that was too close for comfort. He could feel the heat of its breath, the raw power of the creature as it passed just inches from his shoulder. The control panel was unlike anything Jason had seen before. It was covered in alien symbols, similar to the ones he had seen in the ancient texts Doctor Ria had uncovered. The markings pulsed with light, and the energy in the room seemed to intensify as he approached. Jason knew he didn't have much time. If the wolves weren't stopped soon, the entire colony could be at risk. He reached for the panel, his fingers brushing against the smooth surface. The moment he made contact, the entire chamber seemed to react. The hum grew louder, the crystals glowing brighter. Jason could feel the surge of energy running through the panel, and for a split second he feared he had made a grave mistake. But then the control panel shifted. The markings on it shifted, rearranging themselves into a new pattern. The hum grew louder, almost deafening. Jason's hand was locked on the panel, but he couldn't pull away. The energy was too strong. His body tingled with static, and he could feel the ground beneath him vibrate. "Jason!" Dr. Ria shouted from across the room. "What did you do?" He didn't have time to respond. As the energy pulsed through the control panel, a new sound filled the room. A low, rhythmic rumble, like the growl of an ancient beast waking from a long slumber. The wolves paused, their eyes fixed on the nest, and Jason saw something that made his blood run cold. The ground beneath the platform cracked open, and from the depths of the nest, Strange shapes began to emerge, small, wriggling forms, their bodies twisting and shifting as they pulled themselves free from the nest. Jason's heart sank as he saw the creatures. They weren't just puppies. They were something far worse, creatures that looked like twisted versions of the Gorothea, their bodies rippling with unnatural energy, their eyes glowing with an eerie intelligence. "Stop it!" Dr. Rhea cried, rushing forward. "The energy, it's accelerating the transformation." Jason tried to pull his hand away from the control panel, but it was like it had a mind of its own. The creatures were now fully emerging from the nest, their forms shifting and growing in size. It was clear that these were the new generation of Gorothea, the puppies, but they were far beyond what Jason had feared. These were not just animals. They were something far more dangerous, creatures with the potential to control the very energy of the planet. With a final surge, the control panel released a burst of energy that sent Jason stumbling back. The wolves, now fully aware of the new threat, turned on the creatures emerging from the nest. A battle raged between the Gorothea pack and their newly birthed offspring, an explosion of fur, claws, and energy as the two groups clashed in a frenzy of violence. Jason scrambled to his feet, realizing that the wolves were no longer the only danger in the room. The newly born creatures were unpredictable, and they were far stronger than anything they had faced before. The energy from the nest continued to surge, and Jason knew they had to get out of there fast. "We need to leave," he shouted. "Now, Doctor." Rhea and Mara were already retreating, weapons firing as they tried to fend off the newly born creatures. Jason took one last glance at the chaos unfolding in the chamber. The Gorothea wolves were fighting with all their might, but the new puppies were fast, and they were not backing down. If they didn't leave now, they would be overwhelmed. Jason sprinted toward the exit, the sound of the battle echoing behind him. As he reached the cave entrance, he turned for one last look. The entire chamber was alive with energy, the air crackling with power. The puppies were no longer just emerging, they were taking control. And Jason knew, with a certainty he couldn't ignore, that they had only just begun to witness the true power of the Gorothea.